My name is Becky, and the day my Uncle Marcus tried to convince a judge that I was too mentally unstable to inherit $6,200,000 from my Aunt Rachel, I sat in a leather chair watching him perform the role of concerned family member with an Oscar-worthy dedication. His voice dripped with false worry as he explained to the probate attorney how I had always been fragile, how money this substantial would destroy me, how someone responsible needed to manage it on my behalf. He thought the game was already won. What he didn't know was that Aunt Rachel had recorded a 7-minute video the week before she died, and in it, she said his name exactly 17 times, none of them kindly. The attorney, Ms. Chan, sat behind her mahogany desk with a manila folder that seemed too thin to contain the bomb it was hiding. She listened to Marcus with the patience of someone who had heard every variation of this speech before. Beside him sat his wife, Diane, nodding along like a dashboard ornament, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically against her designer purse. Jake has always struggled, Marcus continued, leaning forward with manufactured sincerity. Rachel knew that. She practically raised him when his parents couldn't handle him anymore. But $6 million? That's not love, that's a setup for disaster. Someone needs to protect him from himself. I dug my thumbnail into the armrest hard enough to leave a crescent-shaped dent. Protect me. The same uncle who hadn't called once during the 3 years I spent caring for Rachel through her cancer treatments. The same man who showed up to her funeral in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent and spent the reception calculating shares on his phone. Ms. Chun finally spoke. Mr. Hartley, I appreciate your concern. Her tone suggested she appreciated nothing about him. However, Ms. Rachel Hartley was extraordinarily thorough in her estate planning. Before we discuss any potential guardianship or trust management, I need to complete the reading of her will. Of course, Marcus said smoothly. I just wanted to establish context. Jake's well-being has to come first. The attorney opened the folder. Inside were several printed pages and a USB drive in a sealed evidence bag. She began with the formalities, Rachel's full name, date of birth, declarations of sound mind and clear intent. Then she reached the distributions. To my nephew Jake Hartley, who gave me 3 years of his life when I needed it most, who drove me to every appointment, who held my hand through every sleepless night, who never once asked what he might inherit, I leave my entire estate. She paused, letting the number land. Currently valued at $6,200,000, including my home, investment portfolio, retirement accounts, and all personal property. The silence that followed felt like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. Marcus's careful mask slipped for half a second, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. That can't be the whole thing, he said. What about family? What about me? Ms. Chun continued reading. To my brother Marcus Hartley and his wife Diane, I leave my collection of self-help books on integrity and accountability, along with a letter detailing exactly why they will receive nothing else. Diane's face flushed scarlet. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped with a frozen fish. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. Rachel was on heavy medication. She wasn't thinking clearly. Anyone can see Jake influenced her. He was there every day, poisoning her against her own family. Mr. Hartley, Ms. Chen said, her voice cooling by several degrees, your sister anticipated every argument you might make. She was evaluated by 2 independent physicians within days of signing this will. Both confirmed her complete mental competence. She also left extensive documentation about her reasoning. She held up the USB drive. And she recorded this. Marcus paled. Recorded what? Her final statement. She asked that it be played only if her wishes were challenged. We're not challenging anything, Diane cut in quickly, shooting her husband a warning look. Marcus is just surprised. We all are. But if Rachel wanted everything to go to Jake, then... I want to see that video, Marcus interrupted. I want to know what lies she was told before she made these decisions. Ms. Chen's expression could have frozen vodka. Very well. She connected the USB drive to her laptop and turned the screen so we could all see. After a moment, Aunt Rachel's face appeared, thinner than I remembered from before the final decline, but her eyes were sharp and present. My name is Rachel Marie Hartley, she began, her voice slightly hoarse but steady. Today is November 3rd, and I'm recording this because I know my brother Marcus well enough to predict exactly how he'll react when he learns I've left everything to Jake instead of him. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Marcus, Rachel continued, looking directly at the camera, if you're watching this, it means you've done exactly what I expected. You've tried to argue that I wasn't competent, or that Jake manipulated me, or that I owed you something simply because we share DNA. She smiled without humor. Let me be crystal clear. I am of completely sound mind. I understand the full extent of my assets. I know who my heirs are. And I am choosing deliberately and with absolute certainty to leave everything to the one person who actually showed up. She paused, taking a slow breath. You want to know why you're getting nothing? Let me count the ways. When I was first diagnosed, you called once, said you'd visit soon, and then I didn't hear from you for 6 months. When I asked if you could drive me to a specialist appointment because Jake had the flu, you said you were too busy with a golf tournament. Marcus's jaw clenched. When Jake moved into my house to take care of me full-time, you told him he was wasting his potential, that he should be focusing on his career instead of I playing nurse. You never once offered to help with medical bills, groceries, or even just sitting with me so Jake could sleep for more than 4 hours. But you did call every few months to hint about how expensive your kid's college tuition was getting. I remembered those calls. The way Rachel would put the phone on speaker and roll her eyes while Marcus performed his financial stress monologue. You asked me 3 times to co-sign loans, Rachel said. Twice I said yes, because I still believed in family obligation. You defaulted on both. That's $47,000 I'll never see again, and you never even apologized. The 3rd time, I said no, and you didn't speak to me for 8 months. Diane looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. So here's what happens now, Rachel continued. Jake gets everything because he earned it. Not by asking, not by manipulating, but by being there when it mattered. He held the bucket when I threw up. He learned how to change dressings and manage medication schedules. He read to me when I couldn't sleep and let me cry on his shoulder when the fear got too heavy. Her expression softened as she looked at some point beyond the camera, maybe imagining me watching this someday. Jake, if you're seeing this, remember what I told you. You don't owe anyone an explanation for accepting what I've given you. You don't owe them part of it to keep the peace. You don't owe them forgiveness they haven't earned. She turned her attention back to Marcus. And brother, if you try to fight this in court, if you drag Jake through legal proceedings and make him defend his right to what I've freely chosen to give him, I've left instructions for my attorney. She leaned closer to the camera. Every email, every text message, every documented broken promise, every unpaid loan, it all goes public. I've also authorized the release of financial records showing how you and Diane misrepresented your income when you asked me for money, records your mortgage company and the IRS might find very interesting. Marcus shot to his feet. She can't do that. That's blackmail. It's consequence, Ms. Chen corrected calmly. Sit down, Mr. Hartley. He sat, but his hands were shaking with barely contained rage. Rachel's video continued. I'm not doing this to be cruel. I'm doing this because you need to learn that people are not ATMs with sentimental passwords. Jake was my family in every way that mattered. You were my family in biology only. That's a choice you made, Marcus. These are simply the results. The video ended on her face, tired but resolute. The office fell into heavy silence. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, the hum of Ms. Chen's computer, the sound of Diane's unsteady breathing. There's one more thing, Ms. Chen said, pulling out another document. Ms. Hartley included a no-contest clause in her will. Standard practice, but hers is particularly comprehensive. Marcus looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means if you challenge this will in court and lose, you forfeit even the token bequest of the books. Additionally, Ms. Hartley authorized me to immediately release all documented evidence of financial misconduct to relevant authorities and any parties who might have been defrauded. She looked at him over her glasses. She estimated that a loan would cost you at least $200,000 in legal fees and potential settlements. You're threatening me, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm reading you the terms your sister established, Ms. Chen replied. Threats would be telling you what to do. I'm simply informing you of what will happen depending on what you choose to do. I finally found my voice. You can walk away, I said quietly. Take the books. Read them. Leave this alone. Marcus turned to look at me with something that might have been hatred or might have been fear. You really think you deserve $6 million for doing what any decent person would do? I think Aunt Rachel decided what I deserved, I answered. And I think you've already shown everyone in this room what you deserve. For a long moment, I thought he might actually lunge at me. His face went red, his fists clenched, and something violent flickered behind his eyes. Then Diane put a hand on his arm and whispered something I couldn't hear. Marcus stood slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone felt the weight of his presence. This isn't over, he said. Actually, Ms. Chen replied, it is. You can accept that now or learn it the expensive way. Your choice. They left without another word. I watched them go, Marcus's expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor, Diane practically running to keep up with his angry stride. When the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Ms. Chen gave me a small, professional smile. Are you all right? I don't know, I admitted. I knew he'd be upset, but that was expected, she finished. Your aunt knew exactly who she was dealing with. That's why she prepared so thoroughly. She slid a sealed envelope across the desk. She asked me to give you this after the reading. My name was written on the front in Rachel's distinctive handwriting, a mix of cursive and print that she'd never fully committed to either style. My hands trembled as I opened it. Jake. Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Marcus put on quite a performance. I'm sorry you had to sit through that. But I'm not sorry for what I've left you, asterisk. Asterisk, you gave me 3 years of your life when you could have been building your career, traveling, living the way people your age should live. You sacrificed your 20s to take care of a dying woman. That deserves more than money, but money is what I have to give, asterisk. Asterisk, don't let guilt poison this gift. Don't let Marcus or anyone else make you feel like you manipulated me. You didn't. You loved me. That's not a transaction, it's not a scheme, it's just the rare and beautiful thing that happens when someone sees another person struggling and decides to stay, asterisk. Asterisk, use this money to build the life you put on hold for me. Go back to school if you want. Travel. Start that business you used to talk about. Fall in love. Make mistakes. Just don't waste it trying to prove to people who don't matter that you're worthy of what you've received, asterisk. Asterisk, you were worthy the day you walked through my door with groceries and said, I'm staying. Asterisk. Asterisk, and Jake, when Marcus comes back, because he will come back, probably with lawyers and accusations and strategies designed to wear you down, remember this, you don't owe him your inheritance, your explanation, or your peace of mind. What he calls greed, I call justice. What he calls manipulation, I call love, asterisk. Asterisk, stand your ground. I didn't leave you all this money just to watch you give it away to keep someone else happy. I left it so you could finally put yourself first, asterisk. Love always. Aunt Rachel. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Ms. Chen was watching me with an expression that might have been sympathy or might have been respect. She was right, wasn't she? I said. He's going to come back. Almost certainly, Ms. Chen agreed. People like your uncle rarely accept defeat on the first round. But here's what you need to understand, he has no legal standing. The will is airtight. The documentation is overwhelming. The video is damning. If he takes this to court, he will lose, and he will lose expensively. But he might do it anyway, I said. Just to punish me for existing. He might. Some people would rather burn money fighting a losing battle than accept reality. She leaned back in her chair. But that's not your responsibility to prevent, Your responsibility is to yourself now. Protect what she gave you. Honor her choice by building something good with it. I left the office that day feeling like I was standing at a crossroads I hadn't chosen. Behind me was the life I'd put on hold, the job I'd quit to take care of Rachel, the apartment I'd given up, the relationships that had faded when I stopped being available. Ahead of me was $6 million and the weight of knowing that accepting it meant accepting permanent estrangement from the last connection to my father's side of the family. Marcus called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He called again an hour later. Then again at midnight. By morning, I had 14 missed calls and a text message that simply said, "We need to talk about this like adults." I blocked his number. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. Inside was a notice of intent to contest the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. They demanded I agree to mediation and a fair redistribution of the estate. The letter concluded with a thinly veiled threat about how expensive and unpleasant litigation could become for someone with no legal experience. I forwarded it to Ms. Chen. She called me within an hour. "They're bluffing," she said bluntly. "This firm specializes in intimidating people into settlements. They know they'd lose in court, so they're hoping you'll panic and negotiate." "What do I do?" I asked. "You do nothing." I respond, I remind them of the no contest clause, and I make it very clear that if they proceed, we will bury them in counter-litigation and release every piece of evidence your aunt compiled. And if they call the bluff? Then they learn it wasn't a bluff. Her tone was steel wrapped in silk. "Jake, your aunt paid me a substantial retainer specifically for this scenario. She knew Marcus would try something. She wanted you protected. Let me do my job." The next 2 weeks crawled by in a fog of anxiety and surreal normalcy. I went to the grocery store and found myself calculating how many lifetimes of groceries $6 million could buy. I went to the gym and wondered if the guy on the treadmill next to me would treat me differently if he knew. I lay awake at night replaying the video of Rachel, her voice saying my name, her insistence that I deserved this. Ms. Chen's response must have landed like a nuclear option because Marcus's lawyers went silent. No calls, no letters, no demands. Just empty, ringing quiet. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Marcus showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole, standing in the hallway with his hands in his pockets, looking smaller and older than he had in the attorney's office. No wife, no lawyer, just him in jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt. I opened the door but left the chain engaged. "What do you want?" "To talk," he said. His voice had lost the aggressive edge. Now it just sounded tired. 5 minutes. Please. Against my better judgment, I unhooked the chain and let him in. He walked past me into the living room, taking in my modest furniture, the boxes I still hadn't unpacked from moving back after Rachel died, the framed photo of her and me at the beach that last summer before her diagnosis. "I'm not going to fight the will," he said without preamble. I waited. My lawyers told me I'd lose. Badly. And that even trying would cost me more than I'd ever get back. He sank into my secondhand couch like all the air had gone out of him. "Diane's furious with me. She says I've wasted $15,000 on legal fees we don't have for a fight we were never going to win." "Then why did you start it?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. "Because I couldn't accept that my own sister thought so little of me that she'd leave me nothing. Because I convinced myself you must have done something, said something, poisoned her against me. Because it was easier to blame you than to admit I'd failed her." I felt something shift in my chest, not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of understanding. "You did fail her," I said. "You weren't there. For years." "I know." His voice cracked. "I told myself I was busy, that she'd understand, that there would be time later. And then later ran out." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. "I wanted to visit. I meant to call more often. I just kept putting it off, and then it felt like too much time had passed, and showing up would just make it obvious how badly I'd screwed up. So you didn't show up at all, I said. So I didn't show up at all, he echoed. We sat in uncomfortable silence. Part of me wanted to tell him it was okay, that I understood, that family was complicated and people made mistakes. But Rachel's letter was still folded in my wallet, and her words were still fresh in my mind. You don't owe him your inheritance, your explanation, or your peace of mind. I'm not giving you any of the money, I said finally. I'm not splitting it or loaning it or investing it together or any variation of you getting a piece of what she left me. He nodded slowly. I know. I'm not asking for that. He stood up, moving like every muscle hurt. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not sorry I tried to fight, though I am sorry for that too. Sorry for all of it. For not being there. For letting her down. For trying to make you the villain when the truth is I just couldn't face being mine. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. She was right about you, you know. In the video. You were there when it mattered. That's worth more than I ever gave you credit for. After he left, I stood in my empty apartment for a long time, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over me like snow. It wasn't closure. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just the painful, messy end of something that should have ended differently. I pulled out my phone and called Ms. Chen. He came to see me, I said. He's dropping the contest. I know, she replied. I received official notice this morning. It's over, Jake. The will stands. The estate transfers to you fully in about 6 weeks once the probate period closes. What do I do now? I asked. You live your life, she said simply. Isn't that what she wanted? 6 weeks later, I sat in a different office signing a different set of papers. This time, there was no drama, no performance, no desperate family members trying to claw back what they thought they deserved. Just me, a notary, and the simple act of accepting what Rachel had given me. The money hit my account on a Wednesday morning. I logged into my banking app and stared at the number for a solid 10 minutes, trying to make my brain accept that this was real. $6,200,000. After taxes, after fees, after everything that gets taken out when wealth changes hands, I was still looking at more money than most people see in a lifetime. My first purchase was a sandwich. An excellent sandwich from the deli Rachel loved, the one that made their bread fresh every morning and knew her order by heart. I sat at the same table where she used to sit and ate slowly, tasting everything, remembering how she'd insisted that good food was one of life's few guaranteed pleasures. My second purchase was her house. It had been appraised and included in the estate, but I bought it for myself officially, setting up the paperwork so I owned it free and clear. I moved in a week later, bringing my boxes of books and clothes into the rooms that still smelled faintly like her lavender hand lotion. I quit my job at the call center, the one I'd taken after leaving my actual career to care for her. The one where I'd spend 8 hours a day being screamed at by strangers for problems I couldn't fix. I typed a polite resignation email, sent it, and felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Then I did something Rachel had made me promise to do. I enrolled in the graduate program I'd abandoned halfway through. Ecology and conservation biology. The thing I'd been passionate about before life got complicated. The program director remembered me, welcomed me back, and didn't ask too many questions about the gap in my timeline. 3 months into my new life, I established the Rachel Hartley Foundation. It was a small charitable trust designed to help family caregivers, people who'd put their lives on hold like I had, who needed financial support for education or housing or just breathing room. The first grant went to a woman my age who'd spent 4 years caring for her grandmother with Alzheimer's. When I called to tell her she'd been selected, she cried so hard I had to wait 5 minutes before she could speak. You have no idea what this means, she kept saying. You have no idea. But I did know. That was exactly the point. I saw Marcus one more time, 6 months after he dropped the legal challenge. I was at a coffee shop near the university when he walked in with his daughter, my cousin Emily, who I barely knew. She was maybe 12 now, tall and quiet, with Marcus's dark hair and his wife's sharp cheekbones. He saw me before I could decide whether to leave. For a second, we just looked at each other across the cafe, measuring the distance between who we used to be and who we'd become. Then Emily tugged on his sleeve and said something I couldn't hear. He nodded, said something back, and they got their drinks and sat down at a table on the opposite side of the room. He didn't come over. Didn't wave. Didn't try to pretend everything was fine. Just acknowledged my existence with a small nod and then focused on his daughter. It occurred to me that this was what moving on actually looked like. Not dramatic apologies or tearful reconciliations, just two people who used to be family occupying the same space without setting anything on fire. I finished my coffee and left. I had a meeting with my thesis advisor in 20 minutes, and after that, a call with the foundation's board to discuss next quarter's grant applications. I had a life now, the kind Rachel had worked her entire existence to build for herself and then given to me when she was done with it. Sometimes late at night, when the house settles into its old creaking rhythms, I can almost feel her presence in the rooms. Not haunting, just existing, the way someone you love continues to exist in the spaces they shaped. I'll be reading in her favorite chair or cooking in her kitchen, and I'll remember some small thing she said, some throwaway piece of advice that's become suddenly relevant. Money doesn't change who you are, she told me once, during one of the bad nights when pain made sleep impossible and all we could do was talk. It just makes you more of what you already were. If you're generous, you become more generous. If you're cruel, you become more cruel. Pay attention to who you're becoming, Jake. The money's just the mirror. I think about that a lot. About Marcus, who saw $6 million and immediately calculated what he could take. About me, who saw it and wondered what I could build. About Rachel, who looked at all of it and decided the only thing that mattered was making sure the person who'd actually shown up got to live without fear. The truth is, I did manipulate her. Just not in the way Marcus accused. I manipulated her by being present, by refusing to leave even when it got hard, by loving her without conditions or expectations. If that's manipulation, then I'm guilty. But it's a guilt I can live with. I'm finishing my master's degree in the spring. After that, maybe a PhD. Maybe working for a conservation nonprofit. Maybe starting my own research project. The future stretches out in front of me full of possibilities I couldn't have imagined 4 years ago when I was changing bandages and counting pills and wondering if there was any life left on the other side of grief. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about the money. If I wake up at night thinking I don't deserve it, thinking Marcus had a point, thinking I should have shared it just to keep the peace. The honest answer is, sometimes, yes. Guilt is a complicated beast, and it doesn't always respond to logic. But then I remember Rachel's face in that video. The steel in her voice when she said, "He earned it." The way she planned every detail to protect me from the exact pressure I sometimes feel to doubt myself. And I remember the letter in my wallet, the one I've read so many times, the papers wearing thin at the creases. Asterisk, stand your ground. You don't owe him your inheritance, your explanation, or your peace of mind, asterisk. So I stand. And I build. And I become more of what I was always meant to be, someone who shows up, who stays, who understands that the truest form of wealth isn't money in a bank account, but the choice to be present when presence is the hardest gift to give. Rachel's revenge wasn't just leaving Marcus with nothing. It was leaving me with everything and the backbone to keep it. In the end, that's the inheritance that matters most. Not the $6 million, though that helps. But the knowledge that I'm worth protecting, worth investing in, worth every sacrifice she made to ensure I'd have this chance. And maybe that's the real victory. Not that Marcus lost, but that I won without having to become like him to do it. The last time I visited Rachel's grave, I brought flowers and a copy of my first published research paper. It was about forest regeneration patterns after wildfire, dense with data and probably boring to anyone who wasn't an ecology nerd. But I'd worked on it for 8 months, and it had been accepted by a respected journal, and I was proud of it. I set it on the ground next to the headstone along with the flowers. "Look what I built," I said quietly. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees that surrounded the cemetery. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, and another answered. I stayed for a while, not talking, just being there the way I'd been there when she was alive. Eventually, I stood up, brushed the grass from my jeans, and walked back to my car. As I drove away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and realized I was smiling. Not because I had money. Not because Marcus had lost. But because I was living the life Rachel had bought for me with her final deliberate act of love. And that, in the end, was worth more than all $6 million.